My mom has a strange diary. Over the years, whenever someone treats me well, my mom makes them read this diary. I don't know what's written inside. I only know that everyone who reads it, without exception, distances themselves from me and turns to fawning over my sister instead. Later, I met my fiancé. He swore to me that no matter what happened, he would always stand by my side. I believed him until my mom handed him that diary. Just half an hour later, he became a completely different person. Not only did he publicly break off our engagement, but he also slapped me twice across the face, then turned and knelt before my sister, groveling for her favor. I was completely stunned. I needed to know what exactly was written in that diary. You disgusting viper. You're not even worthy of carrying your sister's shoes. Get lost. Person speaking was my fiancé, Adrian. Just moments ago, he had been whispering sweet nothings to me. But after one glance at that diary, his face completely changed. I clutched my swollen, burning cheek, my ears ringing. This was the fourth time. For relationships, for men who once had eyes only for me, all of them came to despise me to their very bones. After reading that black-covered diary, I stared at Adrian, trying to find some trace of a joke on his face. There was none. His eyes held nothing but undisguised disgust and contempt. My sister Vanessa lounged triumphantly on the sofa, holding a glass of red wine, a mocking smile playing at her lips. Claire, I told you no one could ever truly love trash like you. She swirled her wine glass and took a sip, looking down on me from above. The very picture of victory. Adrian immediately rushed over, snatching the glass from her hand and placing it on the table, his face full of fawning eagerness. Vanessa, don't drink too much. It's bad for you. What would you like to eat? I'll make it for you right now. My stomach churned with nausea, the sick feeling rising in my throat. Just last night, this man had knelt on one knee and slipped a sparkling diamond ring onto my finger. He had cupped my face and sworn to take me away from the suffocating household. He said that no matter what happened, he would stand by my side without hesitation. But now he was groveling before the sister I hated most. And my mother sat in the main seat, leisurely flipping through that thick diary. The black leather cover gleamed with an eerie, oily sheen under the overhead light. Claire, accept your fate. My mother snapped the diary shut and slammed it onto the coffee table. With a loud thud. You're a jinx. You've been cursed your whole life. Anyone who gets close to you ends up in misery. I clenched my fists, my nails digging deep into my palms. I stared at that diary with burning intensity. It was because of that thing that I'd ended up like this. It made everyone who truly loved me abandon me. So I strode toward the coffee table, reaching out to grab it. I needed to see with my own eyes what was written inside. That could make everyone change their attitude in an instant. But my mother moved faster than I did. She clutched the diary to her chest and delivered a resounding slap across my face. The sharp crack of the slap echoed through the living room. I staggered back 2 steps and crashed into the hard edge of the mahogany cabinet. A sharp pain shot through my waist, and I collapsed to the floor. Don't touch my things, my mother snarled. Adrian saw this and immediately rushed over, kicking me hard in the shin. You dare raise your hand to her? Do you have a death wish? He towered over me, pointing an accusing finger. As spittle flew from his mouth onto my face, I braced my hands against the floor and slowly pushed myself up. I looked at each of them in turn. My mother, my boyfriend, my sister, all people I had once treated with genuine sincerity. But now one had hit me, one had kicked me, and one watched with cold indifference. How utterly absurd. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I pointed at them and screamed, you bastards. Since you're all treating me like this, then get the hell out of my house. You don't deserve to be here. Yes, this house was mine. I had worked dawn to dusk to save for the down payment. After renovating it, I had joyfully invited my parents and Vanessa to live with me, thinking I could finally have a warm family. But what I got in return was their favoritism and endless pandering to Vanessa. Over the years, they took my salary to buy her new clothes, yet wouldn't spare me even a bite of meat. They treated Vanessa like a precious treasure and discarded me like garbage. And they used this cursed diary to turn against anyone who was willing to treat me kindly. I'd had enough. Today, I was going to cut ties with these parasites once and for all. Adrian froze for a moment, then burst into wild laughter. Your house, Claire. Stop dreaming. He turned to look at my mother, his face shifting into a fawning expression. Your mother already agreed to transfer the deed to Vanessa. This is Vanessa's house now. I whipped my head toward my mother. When the property deed first arrived, she had locked it in her safe under the pretense of safekeeping. At the time, I thought, well, she's my own mother, so I didn't make a fuss. I never imagined she would secretly transfer ownership to Vanessa. Behind my back, What are you staring at? My mother snorted coldly. The money you earn belongs to the family. Vanessa is getting married soon. And this house is perfect for her wedding home. I'm your mother. Don't I even have the right to make that decision? Vanessa covered her mouth and giggled. Thanks for the house, Claire. Adrian and I will take good care of it. I felt the blood in my entire body freeze. They had not only stolen my fiancé, but were now seizing my property. It was revolting, but there were 3 of them against me. The situation wasn't in my favor. I needed help. After thinking for a moment, I pulled out my phone and dialed the number pinned at the top of my contacts. Professor Martin. He was my college advisor, and the only person in this world I truly respected and trusted. Back when I couldn't afford tuition, he used his own salary to cover it for me. When I got sick with a high fever, he and his wife made soup and brought it to my dorm. To me, he was more like a father. He would surely be willing to help me seek justice. Calling him was the best choice. Phone rang 3 times before he picked up. His warm, concerned voice came through the line. Claire, it's so late. What happened? Why is your voice shaking? I bit my lip hard, but I couldn't hold back anymore. A sob broke from my throat. Professor Martin, my mom took my house. Adrian broke off our engagement. They're trying to throw me out of my own home. There was a second of silence on the other end, followed by the loud bang of someone slamming a table. This is outrageous. Has your mother lost her mind? Where are you right now? Don't move. I'm coming to you immediately. Half an hour later, Professor Martin's black sedan screeched to a halt in front of our building. With a loud crash, he kicked open the half-closed door. Everyone froze, staring at each other. Seeing an outsider barge in, the smile on my mother's face instantly vanished, placed by vicious anger. Professor Martin, what the hell are you doing barging in here in the middle of the night? This is trespassing. I could call the police. Professor Martin stormed to the coffee table and swept the champagne tower onto the floor. The crisp sound of shattering glass, mixed with Vanessa's shrieks, echoed throughout the room. Call the police. Go ahead. Claire is your own daughter, born from your own body. You've bled her dry, stolen her house to give to this brat, and you still have the nerve to talk about humanity? My mother let out a cold laugh, slowly rising to her feet and brushing wine droplets off her skirt. Professor Martin, as an educator, you should watch your language. This is our family's private matter. What right do you, an outsider, have to interfere? Bullshit. Claire is my most outstanding student, and I absolutely will not stand by today. Professor Martin turned and pointed directly at Vanessa, his voice thundering. And you ungrateful wretch. Don't forget who raised you all these years. Treating your sister like this. Do you have any conscience at all? Adrian shrank back, not daring to say a word. Professor Martin turned back around, placing his broad hand heavily on my shoulder. Claire, don't be afraid. I'm here today. Let's see who dares lay a finger on you. Looking at Professor Martin's towering figure, the grief and despair in my heart finally found a small measure of comfort. Just then, my mother suddenly let out a strange laugh and strode into the master bedroom. 10 seconds later, she emerged clutching that black diary. My heart seized and every hair on my body stood on end. Professor Martin, don't rush to play the hero just yet. My mother forcibly shoved the diary into Professor Martin's hands, her lips curling into a deeply malicious smile. Take a look at what's inside first. After you read it, then decide whether you still want to defend this bitch. Professor Martin frowned, his face full of suspicion, as he accepted the diary and flipped directly to the first page. The living room fell into a deathly silence. Even the sound of breathing was clearly audible. I stared intently at Professor Martin's face, my nerves stretched to the breaking point. At first, Professor Martin only casually scanned the words on the page. But in just half a minute, his hands began to tremble violently beyond his control. His breathing became labored, his chest heaving dramatically. Large beads of cold sweat formed on his forehead and slid down his cheeks. I watched as the color drained from his once ruddy face, leaving him pale as a sheet. This can't be you. You actually. Professor Martin's voice shook so badly, he couldn't finish a single sentence. He slammed the diary shut and looked up, fixing me with a terrifying stare. That look was filled with endless shock, fear, and bone-deep hatred. Professor Martin, I called out tentatively, trying to reach for the edge of his sleeve, but he jerked away. The next second, Professor Martin let out a roar like a wild animal and raised his hand, slapping me hard across the face. He used all his strength. I was sent flying and crashed heavily onto the floor, covered in broken glass. Sharp shards pierced my palms and cheeks. Blood streamed down. You beast wearing human skin. Professor Martin pointed at me, his eyes bloodshot with rage. I clutched my bleeding face, staring at him in disbelief. What happened? What the hell is written in that thing? Professor Martin charged toward me, raised his shoe, and kicked me mercilessly in the chest. The pain curled me into a ball like a shrimp. I opened my mouth wide but couldn't make a sound. You have the nerve to ask? You're an absolute monster. I must have been blind to ever treat you like my own daughter. Professor Martin turned to my mother, his attitude completely reversed. He even bent slightly at the waist, his tone full of deep apology. Mrs. Harrison, I apologize for my earlier rudeness. A social menace like her truly doesn't deserve to stay in this house. She should have been beaten to death long ago. My mother smugly snatched the diary back and locked it in the bedroom. Again, Professor Martin crouched down, grabbed a fistful of my hair, and forced my head up. First thing tomorrow morning, I'll submit an application to the university to revoke your degree immediately and remove you from my research team. Trash like you doesn't deserve to exist in this world. He slammed my head against the floor and stormed out. Without looking back, I lay on the cold floor, staring hard at the bedroom. The diary, that diary again. Everyone who read it changed. What secret was hidden inside? What could make them turn on me in an instant? Could it be that my mother deliberately slandered me in the diary? But that didn't make sense. Professor Martin was a university professor, with critical thinking skills. How could he be stupid enough to believe things without evidence? Unless there was something even more damning in that diary? No. I had to see it with my own eyes. I struggled to crawl forward, trying to rush into the bedroom and open that diary. The sharp heel of Adrian's dress shoe ground into my sternum. I choked, the metallic taste of blood flooding my mouth. You want to know what's in the diary? Adrian sneered, leaning down so close I could smell the expensive cologne I had bought him for our anniversary. His eyes, which only yesterday had looked at me with tender adoration, were now pools of absolute venom. You don't deserve to know. A parasite like you doesn't deserve eyes to see, let alone to comprehend the mercy your mother has shown by letting you live this long. Vanessa's sickeningly sweet voice floated from the sofa. Adrian, darling, don't get your shoes dirty. The trash collection will come tomorrow. Let's just put her outside. You're right, my love. Adrian's foot lifted, only to deliver one final, brutal kick to my ribs. The sickening crack echoed in the room. I gasped, curling into a tight, agonizing ball. My mother emerged from the bedroom, her face an emotionless mask of contempt. Get her out. I don't want her bleeding on the new rugs. We have a wedding to plan. Before I could process the sheer, suffocating gravity of their betrayal, Adrian seized me by the collar of my torn blouse and dragged me across the hardwood floor. The floor I had installed with my own hands, paid for with years of my sweat and tears. He hauled me to the front door, opened it, and threw me out onto the cold concrete of the hallway. If I ever see your face near Vanessa again, I'll kill you myself, Adrian spat, his face contorted in a terrifying snarl. The heavy mahogany door slammed shut. The deadbolt slid into place with a definitive, metallic click. I lay there on the freezing landing, the harsh fluorescent lights of the hallway buzzing overhead like carrion flies. My body was a tapestry of agony. Splinters of glass from the champagne tower were still embedded in my palms and cheek. Every breath I took felt like a rusted blade dragging through my lungs. But deeper than the physical pain was the absolute, hollow void in my chest. 4 boyfriends. My entire savings. My home. My blood family. And now, the only father figure I had ever known. All of them stripped away by a single, black leather book. I didn't cry. The time for tears had burned away the moment Professor Martin's foot struck my chest. As I slowly pushed myself up off the concrete, smearing a trail of blood against the wall, a new, cold sensation began to crystallize in my veins. It wasn't sorrow. It was absolute, unadulterated hatred. I am going to find out what is in that book, I vowed to the empty hallway, my voice a ragged whisper. And then, I am going to destroy them all. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in systematic destruction. I managed to drag myself to a 24-hour urgent care clinic 3 miles away. The exhausted doctor on the night shift stitched up my face and wrapped my cracked ribs, casting me a sympathetic but wary look. When I went to pay, the transaction was declined. I checked my phone, my cracked screen illuminating the grim reality. My bank accounts were frozen. A notification from my email showed a message from the university administration. Subject: immediate suspension and revocation proceedings. Professor Martin had kept his word. He hadn't just removed me from his research team. He had filed a Title IX and academic fraud claim against me, alleging fabricated data and disturbing, violent behavior toward faculty. My mother had also moved swiftly. My credit cards were maxed out, likely Adrian and Vanessa going on a shopping spree for their new wedding. They had legally locked me out of everything I owned. I was 26 years old, holding a master's degree, yet I was standing in the freezing rain with $20 in my pocket, the clothes on my back, and a face covered in bandages. I spent the first night huddled in the corner of a 24-hour laundromat, pretending to wait for clothes to dry. My mind replayed the events in a relentless, torturous loop. The diary, the oily, black leather cover. The way the overhead light seemed to be absorbed by it rather than reflect off it. What did Professor Martin see? At first, I had wondered if my mother had forged documents or photos in there. But Professor Martin was a man of science. He wouldn't believe a forged diary entry over 4 years of knowing my character. No. His reaction, the sweating, the trembling, the visceral horror, and the immediate, violent pivot to worshipping my mother and sister, defied logic. It wasn't just persuasion. It was a complete psychological rewrite. I needed to understand the mechanics of the weapon used against me. And to do that, I needed a test subject. I needed someone who had read it before. My mind went to Mark. Mark was my second ex-boyfriend. We had dated 3 years ago. He was a brilliant software engineer, gentle, logical, and deeply in love with me. Then, during a Thanksgiving dinner, my mother had pulled him aside and shown him the diary. 30 minutes later, Mark had walked into the dining room, picked up a carving knife, and tried to stab me in the throat. If my father, who had been alive back then and completely terrified of my mother, hadn't intervened, I would have died. Mark was arrested, but the charges were eventually dropped because he had suffered a complete psychotic break. The last I heard, he was indefinitely institutionalized at the St. Jude Psychiatric Facility in the next state over. If I wanted answers, I had to start with the shattered pieces the diary left behind. It took me 4 days of hitchhiking, sleeping in bus terminals, and pawning my only remaining piece of jewelry, a silver locket my grandmother gave me, to reach St. Jude's. By the time I walked through the sliding glass doors of the facility, I looked like a ghost. My face was pale, the stitches dark and stark against my skin, my clothes wrinkled and damp. I told the receptionist I was Mark's sister. Given my battered appearance, she didn't press too hard for ID, merely assuming I was coming from a desperate situation. She gave me a visitor's badge and pointed me toward Ward C. The orderly led me down a sterile, bleach-scented hallway to a recreation room. In the corner, staring blankly at a muted television, sat a man who looked 50 but was only 28. His hair was completely white. His posture was slumped, his eyes sunken and devoid of light. "Mark," I whispered. He didn't move. I took a step closer, my heart pounding against my bruised ribs. "Mark, it's Claire." The reaction was instantaneous and horrifying. Mark's head snapped toward me. His pupils dilated until his eyes looked like black pits. He opened his mouth and let out a sound that I can only describe as the shriek of a slaughtered animal. He threw himself backward, his chair tipping over, and scrambled desperately away from me, scratching at the linoleum floor until his fingernails bled. "The maggot queen. The devourer," he screamed, sobbing hysterically. "Get her away. She wears my mother's skin. She eats the children." Orderlies rushed into the room, grabbing him. He thrashed violently, pointing a trembling, bloody finger at me. "Don't look at her. She's empty. Her chest is full of teeth. Vanessa, save me. Vanessa, please." I stood frozen. The maggot queen. Wears my mother's skin. Mark had lost his mother to a brutal car accident when he was a teenager. It was his deepest trauma, the ghost that haunted his life. And he was projecting it onto me. But more importantly, he was screaming for Vanessa to save him. He had only met Vanessa twice before that Thanksgiving. I backed out of the room as they sedated him, my mind racing at 1,000,000 miles an hour. The diary wasn't a book of secrets. It was a hallucinogenic trigger. It didn't just tell lies. It weaponized the reader's deepest, most primal fears and traumas, projecting the source of all their suffering onto me. And simultaneously, it positioned Vanessa as their absolute savior, an angelic figure of salvation. It was a psychic virus, a parasite of the mind. And it defied all bounds of modern science. My mother had found, or made, something truly occult. I left the hospital and walked into the freezing drizzle, my mind remarkably clear. If I was dealing with something supernatural, or fundamentally beyond science, I couldn't fight it with lawyers or police. I needed someone who operated in the shadows. I needed someone who knew about the things that slithered beneath the surface of reality. And, crucially, I needed someone who could not read the book. I found Elias through the dark web forums I accessed at a public library. The forums were full of conspiracy theorists and fake ghost hunters, but one name kept appearing with quiet reverence among the serious practitioners: the blind archivist. A man who traded in cursed objects, broken curses, and the occult underground. He lived in a decrepit antique shop in the forgotten industrial district of my city. It took me 2 more days to get back. By the time I stood before the peeling wooden door of Elias Antiquities, I was running on nothing but rainwater, half a stale bagel, and pure, concentrated spite. A bell chimed as I pushed the door open. The shop smelled of dust, dried sage, and old paper. Behind the counter sat a man in his late 60s. He wore dark glasses over his eyes, and a sleek mahogany cane rested against his stool. "The shop is closed," he said. His voice was like grinding stones. "I don't want to buy anything," I said, my voice hoarse. "I need your help. I'm being hunted by a book." Elias paused. He tilted his head, his sightless eyes facing my direction. He took a deep breath through his nose. "You smell of copper, ozone, and stolen luck. Someone has hollowed out your destiny, girl." I walked to the counter. My mother. She has a diary. A black leather book. Anyone who reads it immediately sees me as the source of their worst trauma and my sister as their savior. They turn violent. "It's cost me my fiancé, my mentor, my home, and my life." Elias frowned, his hands moving over the counter to clasp together. "Describe the book." "The texture. The aura." "It's thick. Black leather, but it doesn't look like normal leather. It has an oily sheen like it's sweating. And when my mother holds it, she seems younger, more vibrant, while everyone else around her seems drained." Elias let out a low hiss, a sound of genuine dread. "A soul ledger. A changeling pact." "What does that mean?" He stood up, tapping his cane as he navigated the cluttered space with ease, moving to a back room. I followed him into a dimly lit study filled with braille books and strange artifacts. 50 years ago, there was a sect in Eastern Europe that practiced a form of parasitic alchemy, Elias began, sitting in a velvet armchair. They believed that destiny, luck, and love are tangible energies. If a child is born hollow, without a spark, without charm, destined for nothing, a dark practitioner can bind that child to a host. My breath hitched. "Vanessa." "Yes," Elias nodded. "Tell me, your sister, before your mother found this book, what was she like?" I thought back to our childhood. Vanessa was sickly, cruel, and profoundly unlikable. She had no friends, she failed her classes, and people naturally avoided her. I, on the other hand, had been a bright, beloved child, excelling in everything, naturally drawing people toward me. Then, when I was 12, my mother took a trip to Europe alone. When she came back, she had the diary. And everything changed. Suddenly, Vanessa was glowing. People started fawning over her. And I became the family punching bag, my achievements ignored, my light seemingly dimmed in their eyes. "She was nothing," I whispered. "And then she became everything." "Because your mother anchored a soul ledger to you," Elias said grimly. "The book is a siphon. It takes the love, the respect, and the luck destined for you, and it funnels it into your sister. But it needs an activation mechanism to rewrite the minds of the people who enter your life. When a person who loves you reads the ledger, the book consumes their affection, corrupts it into visceral hatred and terror, and rewrites their loyalty to the parasite, Vanessa." The sheer cosmic injustice of it made my head spin. I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself. "How do I break it?" Elias was silent for a long time. "You don't. To break a changeling pact, you would have to destroy the ledger. But the ledger is protected by the blood of the host and the contractor. If you touch the ink, it will consume you completely. Furthermore, there are 3 of them protecting it, and a legion of thralls." "I don't care," I said, my voice dropping to a dead, icy register that I hardly recognized as my own. "I will burn the house down with them inside if I have to. But I want my life back. I want my soul back." Elias smiled a thin, grim smile. "A girl with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous creature in the universe." "Very well. I cannot read the book, which makes me immune to its visual trigger. I will help you, but you must understand the rules of the ledger." He stood up and pulled a heavy, iron-bound box from a shelf. "To destroy the book, you cannot just set it on fire. The flames must be ignited by the blood of the sacrifice, you. And the fire must be fueled by the ashes of the parasite's most prized possession. If you manage to burn the pages this way, the curse will break. The siphon will reverse." "What happens when it reverses?" I asked. Elias's blind eyes seemed to pierce right through me. "All the luck, love, and life force they stole from you over the last 14 years will violently snap back to its rightful owner. As for them, a parasite cannot survive when severed from its host. They will face the accumulated debt of reality." "Good," I said. Elias handed me a small, wickedly sharp silver dagger and a vial of sulfur. "Your sister is getting married soon, I assume? They stole your fiancé to finalize the bond." "Yes. In 2 weeks. In my house." "Then that is when we strike," Elias said. "A wedding is a ritual of binding. The ledger will be open and active, feasting on the ambient energy of the vows. It will be vulnerable, but you must get to the book, bleed on its pages, and burn it with her prized possession." I touched my bandaged cheek, feeling the jagged edge of the wound Professor Martin had given me. "I know exactly what to do," I said. 2 weeks later, my house, was utterly unrecognizable. I sat in an unmarked van parked half a block down the street, peering through high-powered binoculars Elias had procured. The beautiful, cozy home I had spent years renovating had been transformed into an ostentatious, sickening display of wealth. Massive floral arrangements blocked the windows. Valets were parking luxury cars. Adrian and Vanessa were having a home wedding, bankrolled by the money they had stolen from me, attended by all the people who used to love me. Through the window, I saw Professor Martin in a tailored suit, laughing and clinking a champagne glass with my mother. He looked healthy, vibrant, and completely at ease, completely untroubled by the fact that he had brutally beaten his star student to a bloody pulp a fortnight ago. I felt a sickening churn in my stomach, but I forced it down. Emotion was a luxury I couldn't afford. I was a scalpel today. Pure, cold, and precise. I was dressed in a standard catering uniform. Black slacks, a white button-down, and a black vest that Elias had helped me acquire. My hair was dyed a harsh, unrecognizable jet black, pulled back tight beneath a catering cap. Heavy makeup covered the scars on my face, contouring my features to look sharper, older. I wore a pair of thick, dark-rimmed glasses. To anyone glancing at me, I was just another faceless server. "Are you ready?" Elias's voice crackled through the tiny earpiece in my right ear. He was parked a mile away, monitoring the police scanners and hacking into the home's security system. "Ready," I whispered. "The mother will not let the book out of her sight. During the ceremony, she will likely keep it in her purse or a safe nearby. You need to locate it, secure Vanessa's prized possession, and initiate the burn. You have a 3-minute window before the smoke detectors trigger the fire department." "I know." I stepped out of the van and walked toward the side entrance of the house, where the catering trucks were unloaded. I grabbed a tray of champagne flutes and seamlessly merged with the flow of the hired staff. I kept my head down, my movements brisk and invisible. I entered the kitchen. It was controlled chaos. Chefs were yelling. Servers were rushing out. I moved through the kitchen and slipped into the hallway leading to the bedrooms. Vanessa's prized possession. I knew exactly what it was. It wasn't jewelry. It wasn't money. It was the absolute, undeniable proof of her victory over me. The deed to the house and the wedding certificate they were about to sign. But more than that, it was the bespoke, silk wedding veil my mother had commissioned from Paris, spun with silver thread. Vanessa had gloated about it for months before she even stole Adrian, telling me how a real woman deserved to wear such a thing, not a drab workhorse like me. I slipped into the master bedroom. My mother's things were scattered everywhere. And there, sitting on the vanity, was my mother's large leather handbag. I locked the bedroom door quietly. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I approached the bag. I unclasped it. Inside, wrapped in a black velvet cloth, was the diary. Just looking at it made the air in the room drop 10 degrees. My ears began to ring with a faint, high-pitched whine. The oily leather seemed to pulse, matching the rhythm of my heartbeat. It recognized me. The battery had returned. "I have you," I thought, pulling the heavy tome from the bag. "Elias, I have the book," I whispered into the mic. "Excellent. Get the veil. Proceed to the master bathroom. It has the best ventilation to delay the smoke alarms." I turned to the bed. Vanessa's backup dress and her magnificent silver-threaded veil were laid out carefully on the mattress. I grabbed the veil, feeling the delicate silk crush under my grip. I moved to the ensuite bathroom, locking that door behind me as well. I laid the veil out in the porcelain sink. I placed the diary on top of it. I pulled the silver dagger Elias had given me from my boot. "This ends now." I took a deep breath, raised the dagger, and slashed it across my left palm. The pain was sharp and biting, but it felt like a release. Bright red blood welled up instantly, dripping onto the porcelain. I reached out with my bloody hand and flipped the diary open. I had expected to see terrible words, slander, or demonic sigils. But what I saw froze the blood in my veins. There were no words. The pages were made of something resembling stretched, dried skin. And on the paper, drawn in what looked like dried blood, was a grotesque, moving portrait of my own life. It was a mirror, just as Mark had said, but it wasn't reflecting me. It was reflecting the horrific reality of the siphon. I saw a shadowy, bloated entity, Vanessa, with hundreds of ethereal umbilical cords attached to a smaller, emaciated figure, me. I saw the faces of Adrian, Professor Martin, and my past boyfriends, their eyes hollowed out, dark maggots pouring from their mouths as they knelt before the bloated entity. The book wasn't just magic. It was a sentient, starving thing. And as my fresh blood hit the pages, the book screamed. It wasn't a sound you could hear with your ears. It was a psychic shockwave that slammed into my skull. The bathroom mirror shattered outward. The lights blew out, plunging the room into darkness, save for a sickening, violet glow emanating from the pages. The ink writhed. The book was trying to fight back, trying to burrow into my mind and rewrite me as it had the others. A massive, crushing wave of despair hit me. Visions flashed before my eyes. I am worthless. I am a monster. I deserve to die. I should cut my own throat. Vanessa is a goddess. Mother is right. I staggered back, dropping the dagger, my hands clutching my head. The psychic pressure was immense, driving me to my knees. Blood poured from my nose. Claire. Elias's voice crackled frantically in my ear. The book is fighting back. It senses the host. You must ignite the blood. Now. I fought through the suffocating fog of despair. I bit my own tongue, using the sharp, grounding pain to anchor my mind. No. I am Claire Harrison. I built my life with my own 2 hands. They are parasites. I forced myself up. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the Zippo lighter Elias had provided, doused in sulfur. Just as my thumb flicked the wheel, the bathroom door exploded inward. My mother stood in the doorway, holding a heavy bronze lamp she had used to smash the lock. Behind her were Adrian and Professor Martin, their faces twisted into masks of inhuman rage. The psychic scream of the book had alerted them. The thralls had been summoned. You little bitch, my mother hissed, her eyes darting to the sink. When she saw the open diary smeared with my blood, her face went deathly pale. Kill her. Don't let her light it. Adrian lunged at me like a rabid dog. There was no hesitation, no humanity in his eyes. He tackled me to the tile floor, his hands wrapping instantly around my throat, squeezing with lethal force. Die, you demon. Adrian screamed, spittle flying onto my face. Professor Martin stepped over us, his eyes fixed on the sink. He reached out to grab the burning book. My vision was spotting with black. My windpipe was crushing under Adrian's manic strength. But I had expected this. I knew I couldn't fight them physically. As I lay pinned, I brought my right hand, the one holding the lighter, up, and instead of striking Adrian, I slammed it into his eye. Adrian shrieked in agony, his grip loosening just enough for me to draw a breath. I kicked upward with both legs, catching him in the chest, sending him crashing into the glass shower door. The glass shattered, raining down on him. Professor Martin had his hands on the diary. He was trying to pull it away from the veil. Professor! I screamed. He looked back at me. I grabbed the silver dagger from the floor and threw it. I had never thrown a knife in my life, but adrenaline and sheer, desperate will guided my hand. The blade sank deep into Professor Martin's shoulder. He cried out, stumbling backward and dropping the book back into the sink. My mother shrieked. Useless idiots. She charged at me, her face contorted into something genuinely demonic. In that moment, I saw her not as my mother, but as the pathetic, grasping witch she truly was, a woman who had sacrificed her own flesh and blood for the illusion of power. She swung the bronze lamp at my head. I rolled out of the way. The lamp smashed the bathroom tiles. I scrambled to my feet, diving for the sink. I grabbed the lighter. My mother grabbed my hair, pulling me backwards so hard I felt my scalp tear. You were born to serve us, she screamed into my ear, her nails digging into my neck. You are nothing but fuel. I gave you life, I have the right to take it. Then burn in hell with your creation, I rasped. I flicked the lighter. A massive spark caught the sulfur Elias had coated it with. I thrust my hand backward, shoving the flaming lighter directly into my mother's face. She screamed, letting go of my hair as the flames singed her eyelashes and hair. Free for a microsecond, I turned to the sink. The diary was pulsing violently, the violet glow strobing. I plunged the flaming lighter directly onto the blood-soaked pages of the diary, right into the center of the crushed silver veil. Whoosh! A column of unnatural, emerald green fire erupted from the sink, hitting the ceiling. The heat was instantaneous and blistering. The reaction was catastrophic. The moment the pages caught fire, a sound like 1,000 shattering glass windows ripped through the house. The psychic pressure in the room didn't just break, it imploded. The green flames rapidly consumed the leather, the blood, and the silk veil. As it burned, thick, black smoke poured from the pages, forming screaming, twisted faces, the stolen affection, the corrupted memories, the life force that had been siphoned away from me for 14 years. And oh, my mother shrieked, falling to her knees. She clawed at the air, trying to grab the smoke, her hands blistering from the heat. My power. My beautiful girl. No! I backed away against the wall, watching the inferno. The effects of the curse breaking were instantaneous and horrific to witness. Adrian, who was pulling himself out of the shattered shower stall, suddenly froze. The manic, rabid hatred drained from his face in a split second. He blinked, the dilated darkness in his pupils receding. He looked down at his bleeding hands, then at the destruction around him. Then he looked at me. His eyes widened in absolute, unadulterated horror. The false memories, the hypnotic illusions that the book had planted in his mind, were incinerated. Reality crashed down on him with the weight of a falling skyscraper. He remembered our engagement. He remembered how much he loved me. And then, he remembered what he had done. The slap, the brutal kicks, throwing me into the street, choking me just moments ago. "Claire?" Adrian whispered, his voice trembling so violently he sounded like a child. "Oh my God. Claire, what did I do? Oh God, what did I do?" He collapsed to his knees among the broken glass, vomiting on the floor as the psychological trauma of his own actions shattered his mind. Professor Martin was slumped against the wall, clutching his bleeding shoulder. He, too, was waking up. The dignified, brilliant academic looked around the ruined bathroom, his eyes falling on my battered face, the scars he had given me. "Claire?" The professor began to weep. The sound was pathetic, a deep, racking sob of a man realizing he had become a monster. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It was like a nightmare. I couldn't stop it. I saw you as a devil." But I wasn't looking at them. I was watching my mother. As the book burned to ash, the stolen life force violently severed its connection to her and Vanessa. The backlash was physical. My mother's hair, which was perfectly dyed and styled, seemed to gray and wither in seconds. The vitality in her skin vanished, replaced by deep, sagging wrinkles. She aged 20 years in 20 seconds, collapsing onto the floor like a deflated balloon, coughing weakly. "The wedding," she croaked, her voice paper-thin. "Vanessa, my beautiful Vanessa." Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream echoed from the hallway outside. It was a scream of pure, biological agony. I stepped over Adrian, ignoring his pathetic grasping at my ankles. "Claire, please, I love you, forgive me," he wailed. I kicked his hand away coldly and walked out of the bathroom. I moved down the hallway toward the grand staircase. At the bottom of the stairs, the lavish wedding ceremony had descended into utter bedlam. The guests were screaming and backing away. Standing at the altar, dressed in her backup gown, was Vanessa. But she wasn't the radiant, ethereal beauty she had been an hour ago. Without the siphon constantly feeding her my life force, the illusion of her charm and vitality collapsed. The ugly, hollow rot inside her soul manifested physically. Her hair was falling out in clumps, littering the white carpet. Her skin was sallow, covered in sudden, furious blemishes. But worse than her physical deterioration was the aura around her. The crowd, who had just been fawning over her, suddenly looked at her with the deep, instinctual revulsion one feels when looking at a venomous insect. The spell that made them love her was broken. They saw her for what she truly was, a cruel, empty parasite. Vanessa clutched her face, screaming as she looked at her reflection in a decorative mirror. "My face. What's happening to me? Adrian. Mom. Help me." Nobody moved to help her. The guests, many of whom were my former friends and colleagues, were rubbing their heads, looking around in utter confusion, as if waking up from a mass trance. I slowly walked down the stairs, stepping into the center of the room. The catering cap had fallen off, my dyed black hair messy, my face streaked with sweat, my own blood, and soot. Vanessa saw me. Her eyes widened with a mix of terror and absolute hatred. You did this to me. You ruined my wedding." She grabbed a heavy silver candlestick from the altar and charged at me, intending to bash my skull in. I didn't flinch. I didn't even raise my hands to defend myself. Before she could take 3 steps, 2 of the male guests, men who had previously ignored me to cater to Vanessa's every whim, instinctively stepped forward and tackled her to the ground. "Get off me," Vanessa shrieked, thrashing wildly. "She's a monster. Kill her. Call the police," one of the guests said, looking at Vanessa with absolute disgust. "This woman is insane." I stood there, looking at the pathetic, writhing creature on the floor. The heavy, suffocating weight that had pressed down on my shoulders for 14 years, the subtle, insidious drain of my luck, my energy, my light, was gone. I took a deep breath. The air tasted sweet. I felt lighter, sharper, more powerful than I had ever felt in my entire life. The energy the book had stolen from me was flooding back. From the top of the stairs, Adrian came stumbling down. He was covered in blood and vomit, weeping hysterically. He pushed through the crowd and collapsed at my feet, wrapping his arms around my legs. Claire, I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me. I love you. I only love you. It was a spell. You have to believe me. She used something on me. Please, let me make it up to you. I'll do anything." I looked down at the man who had promised to stand by my side no matter what. The man who had slapped me, kicked me, and thrown me into the freezing rain. "Let go of me, Adrian," I said. My voice wasn't angry. It was terrifyingly calm. "No, please. We can still get married. We can fix this." I reached down, grabbed his wrists, and pried his hands off me with a strength that surprised both of us. I stepped back. "You broke your promise in 30 seconds, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent room. "Magic or not, the diary didn't put the violence inside you, Adrian. It just gave you permission to use it. You're a coward." I looked up at Professor Martin, who was leaning heavily against a banister, pale and trembling, holding his bleeding shoulder. Our eyes met. He looked away, thoroughly broken by his own shame. He would never teach again. The guilt would eat him alive for the rest of his days. Sirens began to wail in the distance, growing louder. Elias had called the police, reporting a violent disturbance and an assault. My mother finally dragged herself to the top of the stairs. She looked like a beggar woman, frail, wrinkled, and pathetic. She stared at me, her eyes filled with a desperate, pathetic pleading. "Claire," she whispered. "My daughter." "I have no mother," I said simply. I turned my back on them all. I walked through the parted crowd, through the front door of my house, and out into the cool, evening air. The aftermath was a glorious, methodical reclamation of my life. With the book destroyed, the mass delusion evaporated. The police arrived and found my mother and sister in a state of violent hysteria. Vanessa was committed to a psychiatric facility after she attacked 2 paramedics, screaming about stolen beauty and demons. Adrian and Professor Martin both fully confessed to assaulting me. Adrian was charged with attempted murder for strangling me in the bathroom. Professor Martin was stripped of his tenure, arrested for his previous assault, and faced multiple lawsuits. Both men wrote me endless, agonizing letters from their cells, begging for my forgiveness, explaining that their minds had been hijacked, that the book had shown them horrific illusions of me murdering their loved ones. I burned every single letter unopened. My mother tried to claim ownership of my house, but without the supernatural charm of the diary, the courts saw the transfer of the deed for what it was: elder coercion and fraud. I had a brilliant lawyer, a woman who inexplicably felt drawn to my case pro bono, ripped my mother's claims to shreds. My mother was left destitute, living in a cramped, state-funded nursing home, her mind rapidly deteriorating. Without my life force to sustain her unnatural youth, time caught up with her all at once. 6 months later, I stood in the antique shop, pouring a cup of jasmine tea for Elias. "The house sold yesterday," I told him, placing the delicate porcelain cup near his hand. "Above market value." "I am not surprised," Elias said, taking a slow sip. "Your aura is blinding, Claire. It is as if you are burning with the light of 2 lifetimes. The energy they hoarded has returned to you with interest." "It feels strange," I admitted, looking at my reflection in a dusty mirror. The scars on my face had healed into faint, thin lines, but they didn't detract from my appearance. Instead, they made me look fierce, untouchable. People look at me differently now. Doors open. Opportunities just appear. It's almost too easy. "That is your natural destiny," Elias said softly. "You were born to be extraordinary." They tried to chain an eagle to a rat, hoping the rat would learn to fly. Now, the chain is broken. "And the book?" I asked. "Are there others out there?" Elias smiled a cryptic, blind smile. "The world is old, Claire. And the dark is very deep. There are always parasites. But there are also those who learn to wield the fire." He reached under the counter and pulled out a heavy, leather-bound journal. It wasn't black or oily. It was a rich, warm brown, embossed with gold. "I am getting old," Elias said. "And my eyes see only the shadows. I need an apprentice. Someone who understands the nature of curses, the architecture of hate, and the price of blood. Someone who cannot be broken." I looked at the journal. Then I looked at the old, blind archivist. I thought about Mark, destroyed in an asylum. I thought about the 14 years of quiet agony I had endured. I thought about the green fire, and the way it felt to burn away the rot of the world. I reached out and took the journal. "When do we start?" I asked. Outside, the sun broke through the heavy city clouds, casting a brilliant, golden light over the streets. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the future. I was the architect of it. And heaven help anyone who ever tried to steal it from me again.